welcome to Shrink Wrap. I'm Szifra Birke, an executive coach, and I'm here today without my co-host Edna Lazat, but I am here today with Jay Livingston. Jay's here today to talk about a book that he's written called Simple Steps to Change Your Business and Your Life. And to give you a little bit of background, Jay's an expert on change, both professionally and personally. Jay helps clients come up with simple ideas and small usable steps to implement the changes that they want or need to make. He's also a go-to coach and consultant for individuals who want to learn new business, communication, and personal habits, and for new managers who want to increase their leadership skills. And as a kind of spoiler alert, Jay happens to be also my business partner and my husband. So welcome to Shrink Wrap, Jay.
Thank you.
So I'm really delighted that you're here today to talk about your new book. And I'm interested in knowing and particularly having our audience know, what inspired you to write this book, Simple Steps to Change?
Repeating things is really helpful. And so when I'm coaching clients, they hear from me what they might try or what they might do, but then I had to constantly be writing notes for them to take home. And so this is a compilation of all the ideas that I've given them so they have it in one place. They can look ahead, they can cheat, whatever, and decide what works for them. So once I had started putting it in that format, I thought, why not make it available to people who might get some value out of it even if they're not working with me? So the book kind of evolved from there.
Got it. Well, I think I say this with bias and without bias. If I were not your business partner or your spouse, I would still be saying to you that this is a really good, usable, straightforward book on change. And everything from simple habits that people are trying to change all the way to communications that they might want different. So,
thank you.
So kudos to you for this ebook. And So when we were brainstorming before the show, we talked about some questions that might be interesting for our audience to hear about. And one of them was your question of, can people really change? So can you address the can people really change?
Well, I think we all know that young people and children can change, but that older people can't change. And we learned that early from, old dogs can't learn new tricks. The problem with that is that in an early part of my career, I was a dog behaviorist. And I taught old dogs new tricks. One of the most kind of interesting things was house training a 15-year-old dog who had never been house trained. But certainly many, many tricks. And it got me wondering if there really was a problem with people changing as they got older. And the answer is no. People can change at any age with any amount of habit. And it really, the issue is, how hard is it to change? How much investment do you have to make? And the answer is, if you do it right, a lot less than it may feel like. So yes, people can change. People can change profoundly. They can certainly change small habits, but they can also change, sort of the major way they approach life. I've seen people who are quite irritable become considerably less irritable. I've seen people who are quite afraid of things become considerably less afraid. And I've seen people who eat a certain diet eat a completely different diet. So yeah, people can change.
Got it. And you said something a little bit intriguing to me. You said if they do it right. And by do it right, are you thinking of like the science of change, or are you thinking specific to that individual, or both, or what were you thinking?
Yes, all of the above. It has to be individualized. Each person comes with a different set of experiences and strengths and weaknesses, and they need to figure out how they personally can best change. And having a coach help them can be one way to do that. So yes, it has to be individualized, but there's some really basic things that we know are true for most people, and we get that from research. We get that from many, many years of experience. I mean, I can't see people for 30 years and not say, this seems to work with a lot, and that doesn't seem to work. But, you need to take that research and say, can I help a person apply this to themselves individually, to how, their past experience has been of change? What were they successful with? Why not work off of something that's been working in the past? And some people have never been successful at change. It's fine. Let's go to the science and let's see where we should start experimenting. So,
so you're saying, like, if you have a certain client who walks in the door, somebody who, for example, is chronically late for work, that you would look to their previous success
Sure.
at changing something else.
Right. So some of those people have been chronically on time for certain appointments or types of situations. Let's just say I know a lawyer who is chronically late with everything except court times. They're always on time for court. So we can take maybe what they use to get them on time to court and begin to apply it in other areas of their life. So, you know, you want to work with the individual's strengths. Why develop new and different things if something old is working? But for many people, no, they haven't been successful at all. They're chronically late for virtually everything. And you say, okay, let's start with what time are you supposed to be at work? And they'll say, about 7. And I'll say, frankly, it's very hard for me to get a picture in my head or to set my clock at something that's called about 7. And so instantly you're starting to fudge for me, and it's starting to get foggy, and there's nothing sharp and clear about it. So it's going to be very difficult to build a getting on time. So let's pick a time you're actually going to be there. And just that little step, that actually going to be there, sharpens up the image for somebody. So they say, okay, well, I'm going to be there at 7. And I know that what's happened is now the word is correct, but internally I'm not sure they've got the idea. And I'll say, so you're talking 7 o'clock. Yeah, 7 o'clock sharp, or 7 o'clock and maybe up to 7:05. And they say, well, and so by sharpening and repeating and looking, I get them to really understand that they're going to try to be there at, and let's say they've chosen, actually it's 6:55 I want to be there. 6:55, great. At your office, at the time clock, at the front door, in the parking lot. You're going to take the 6:55, the train that gets to the station at 6:55. What are you actually saying? And by working their way through, they take something that's been vague and unsuccessful, and they begin to say, okay, this is at least what I'm really trying to accomplish.
So part of what I'm hearing is that for some people, the lack of success may come from the lack of specificity.
Exactly.
So, good.
That was very specific.
Good.
That's good.
So, are you saying for some people that might even be enough once they actually really identify what the goal is and they can specify it down to that minute detail? I want to arrive at my desk by 6:55. That for some people that might be the step that they need.
Yeah. That's true for some people, it works. And for some people, you just take the next step saying, if you need to be there at 6:55, what time does that mean you need to leave your house? And they will say, well, I need to leave at whatever time. And there's actually kind of a formula that you can put in there that's very helpful, which is this something you need to be to 90% of the time, 9 out of 10 days? How often can you afford to be late? And if they say, I can never afford to be late, this is my wedding, then I say, well, okay, so what time do you have to leave to be assured that you never are going to run into a traffic jam? Or if you do, you can survive it. And they say, well, it looks like 3 hours early for a half-hour trip. Great. But for work, you say, in general, if I'm late maybe one day every 2 weeks, that's a tolerable thing as long as I'm within, say, 15 minutes. And so we now can say, okay, so how many days of the week are there traffic jams that slow you down? And you come up almost with a formula.
Got it.
And that helps people to say, great, so now I know when I've got to be there, and I really have a sense of what time I have to leave. And for some people, you walk it back to what time the alarm goes off.
Okay. So that's great for the person who's late. What about if my problem, I come to you and my problem is I can't get tasks finished at work. I'm a person who holds up the project from getting completed. How do you help me with that?
I try to fool people to start with. And I say, do you put deadlines in your calendar? And they say, oh yeah, I put deadlines in my calendar. And what I know about deadlines is that a deadline means I have to do something on that day. And so you're behind. And so we start saying, let's start putting in start dates, because at least that gives you some impetus to get moving. And so we look at not the deadline for it being due, but if you were really on top of things, when in fact would you have it done? Do you need to have it reviewed? Do you want to wait a day after you've got it done and look at it yourself? And oftentimes that's a day, 2, 3, 4 ahead of time. And then we say, fine, how many days is it going to take you? And we get, again, very specific. And they say, this project, I don't know how long it's going to take me. And I say, great. So we're 2 months out from the project or 1 month out from the project. Go spend an hour or two and get the project started with the sole purpose of discovering how long you think it might take you so that you can put a start date down. But of course, it's kind of a tricky thing because now they no longer have a blank piece of paper to start with. They have started the projects actually. And it's easier for them to say, oh, I can do the next step and the next step and the next step. So there's some planning things that happen way over here that actually set them up for success down here. And so this is what we have to teach people to do.
So the simple steps, borrowing from the book title, Simple Steps to Change, is that the simple step in the first example was really about being specific. Mm-hmm. The simple step in this example might be taking the start date rather than the mm-hmm. date that the deadline date, mm-hmm. right? That might be the simple step that might.
And just as we talked about individualizing it for people, some people might instantly come up with a start date, but then have a hard time getting started. Their simple step is sit down, take an hour, and just start, whatever that is, and let's see how that pushes you forward. Some people it's outlining. So again, for each person it might be slightly different, but it is, you know, yeah, if somebody said, give me one trick to getting projects done, set a start date.
Uh-huh.
And give yourself plenty of time and actually start it on that date.
Yeah. So there is an aspect of your work that sounds like you help the person kind of know thyself. And they may not know these things about themselves, that they work better if this or that if they are more specific, or if they work well with an outline versus just kind of sitting and allocating 1 hour or 30 minutes or 10 minutes or setting. I know you've had people set timers for certain periods of time, short periods, right? We both work with adults and young people with ADHD, and I'm guessing
among
that
other people, yeah.
Among other people, right. And so I know that in your book you talk about a little bit about for people who have attentional or other kinds of issues, there may be some other steps. It might be a little bit more difficult to sit down and do that pre-planning. And so they may have to work a little harder to find the simple step and to keep momentum going.
And actually my job as a coach, when I'm in that role, is when somebody says, I'm not successful, even though I set a time, I don't do it. My job is, okay, how can we make it easier to do that step? If we can't make it simple, if we can't make it easy to do, so that a person can at least think about it easily, you know, it's not going to work. So once we get it, sometimes what it is I call them up. Hi, it's Wednesday, you were going to start your project, you know, how's it going? And that's enough to keep it going. Other times, you know, they get a partner at work or at home to do it. You know, we use computer reminders, we use all sorts of things. And then we look at what works and what doesn't work. And for everybody, that's really one of the simple steps is are you tracking? Are you paying attention to what works and what doesn't work? Keep using the things that work. When something doesn't work, how could you modify it? And that's really the other piece of this.
Right.
I also think it's important, we use the word simple here, easy. This stuff is simple in the traditional sense of easy, hard. It's not necessarily easy. It takes some effort. And the question is, can we make it so that that effort comes as easily as possible?
Yeah, you and I were talking about my recent practice of trying to institute a habit change, sort of for the sake of seeing experimentally how long it would take. And the example was toothpaste. So I read recently, again, that all we need is a pea-sized amount of toothpaste, which works perfectly on the toothbrushes, the electric small head toothbrushes. On the 1 inch or however long the manuals are, we're used to doing that swipe. So I decided I wanted to do a pea-sized on the manual toothbrush. And it took me close to 3 months to get to the point where 80 to 90% of the time, maybe now it's up to 95 or 98% of the time, I automatically do that pea-sized piece. So you're right, even for something that doesn't matter, it's not easy to change those ingrained kind of long-term habits.
And that's the thing, that so much of this is about a habit, and losing the old habit, getting rid of it, getting the new habit, and that process is well understood, and it's just difficult to go through. And people say, well, what's the trick? What's the secret? Practice, repetition, practice, maybe some repetition, along with some practice and some repetition. And that's what it takes to get yourself through that. So how do you set that up so that's as easy as possible? How do you go so that you remember more times? Do you put a sign on the mirror in front of you? To put a sign on the toothpaste tube? You know, what is it that you do so that you have more and more successes? So our brains are designed so that the neurons develop thicker walls and better insulation the more we use a circuit, and so that they're more resistant to change. So you got a really good habit, it's very resistant to change. Some people think of it like a deep ditch. And so to change, we have to interrupt that circuit. It's very, very difficult in some ways, even when it's simple. But the more I can do this way, that has very weak walls and tentative, and I build this circuit, this one will start to diminish. And at some point, you've got both going. It's easy to do this, and it's not too hard to do that. And you just got to keep working on it.
Right. And
you said something that I thought was interesting, which is how do you talk to yourself when you make mistakes?
yeah, I mean, I think that's key for someone like me who, when I do the default old behavior, I need to be able to be really patient with myself and kind of laugh at myself or be lighthearted, or because I know the science, be like, oh, there's my brain doing the default behavior that it's used to doing. This is what's efficient for my brain.
Right.
And it's hard to push it into this new, unknown kind of pattern. I often think, even though this isn't an accurate metaphor, I think when we've built a habit, right? We have like a bicep that's like this big for the old habit, and we have this puny little bicep for the new one. And so I have to rest the one that's really strong and keep, as you, in your terms, repeat and what's your other word? Repeat and practice, yeah. And so that eventually I've let this one get weaker and this one gets stronger. And I know that's not literally how the brain works, but.
And the other thing to know is that your brain will always have remnants of the old habit. And in quick moments, you'll fall back on it. So it's really important to forgive yourself and say, I got to keep going. I just got to keep going.
Yeah. And to kind of, at least for me, it's forgive myself and kind of chuckle about it. You know, it's like, there it is again, you know, with a kind of non-judgmental curiosity.
The trick is to laugh about it when everybody else is blaming you, right?
Yeah, there you go. That is really a big trick.
Yeah.
So speaking of tricks, you have one that I think you invented, the inventor of, you know, don't redecide, which is pretty compelling. So can you tell our audience about?
Sure. One of the problems that most people have is that they can sit back in sort of the cool, rational moment and say, I want to do such and such. I want to, anything from get up at this particular time to not eat this food to I'm going to go exercise to, you know, I'm going to have meetings that have an agenda. Whatever they're doing, they've made those decisions. And then when the emotional impact comes, and emotions, by that I mean anything that has, like, say, from tiredness, hunger, anger, anxiety, it just doesn't matter, but it has some of that, they redecide. And it's the absolute worst time to redecide what you're going to do. And so to coach yourself and to say, don't redecide, just do it. Don't redecide, just do it.
So translating what you're saying, I've decided that I'm a person who's going to set my alarm for 6 in the morning in order to be at the office at 6:55, and now my alarm goes off.
And you say, can I afford to snooze? Don't redecide your decision, just get up. And it gives you something to say to yourself because you're talking over top of that emotional pull. But I'm tired. Don't redecide, just get up. But I didn't get to bed on it. Don't redecide, just get up. And it gives you something to focus on. Get your feet on the floor. Don't redecide this decision. Just keep moving. And it's a way to kind of pull yourself into something that at that moment doesn't feel like the right thing.
Because at the moment, we just want to do what feels good rather than what might be good for us.
Yes.
Right? So it's interesting, you know, I haven't heard you really talk about it in quite this way. This was actually really helpful for me, that notion of don't redecide, just do it. Don't redecide, just do it. So this is where the specificity comes in again, right? Mm-hmm. So if the person knows
yes.
that they've made the decision
exactly.
to set the alarm and put their feet on the floor, not just set the alarm
right.
and the alarm goes off.
Right.
So there's a
that
sequence.
Might be the first thing we talk about, and they say it didn't work, and I say, what were you going to do when the alarm went off? Put your feet on the floor.
Got it. So that's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
So when I've done that, I've done it a little differently because I think I didn't understand. And so I would say to myself, you've already decided this, and so you need to just keep going.
Sure.
I like the abbreviated shorthand of don't redecide. It's just really quick and efficient.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And, you know, it doesn't have to be a word, it just has to have some meaning. And for most people, it just is. And the just do it is the very next, very simple little step. And this is back to the simple steps to change idea, is like put your feet on the floor. Get dressed for exercise.
So can you share, speaking of that, it brings to mind the experience of when you've set a goal, which you had, a goal around bicycling. And there are many moments I watch you not really in the mood to get on your bike for a hard ride. And can you describe what you do to not redecide?
First of all, I suffer. I sit there and I fight with myself and I talk to myself. Don't redecide, don't redecide. Just do it, just do it. And sometimes I catch myself going, do what? And I go like, something simple. It's got to be something simple. I'm just going to go out and pump up my bike tires. And of course, when the bike tires are pumped up, it's like it's a little easier to think about, well, I've pumped my bike tires up. I should just go get my clothes on. I don't have to decide to go racing, to go riding. I've already decided that. Just go put your clothes on. Well, once you get your clothes on, it's pretty hard not to go. So I've suckered myself in by doing tiny little steps. Fill the water bottles. You're not making any decisions here. You're just doing this little thing. Just, you know, I don't want to. You don't have to ride. Just go fill your water bottle.
Yeah.
You don't have to ride is a form of, you've already decided that. So it's like you don't have to decide whether you're going to ride. Just go fill your water bottle. And so that's worked really well. And by the way, I got a bicycle coach to see how it worked, and it's like, uh-oh, my coach is expecting it, and that's running in my head, and that helps some too.
Got it. Interesting. So knowing what the steps are that work for you,
Mm-hmm.
like, and they're small incremental kind of approximations, toward getting on your bike. But you don't tell yourself you're getting on your bike. You just tell yourself, I just have to do this next thing. Mm-hmm. Just do this next small, achievable, tiny.
And emotionally in there, I'm going like, I really don't have to ride, maybe. And I just keep ignoring that. You're not going to decide that right now. And I just keep moving forward. And then all of a sudden, I find the garage door open, my bike's standing there, I'm dressed, and it's like, so I might as well ride around the block at least. And of course, I go down the end of the street, and it's like, now suddenly I'm having fun, and I just go.
Right.
So.
Right. So that's great. I have an example of that doesn't work quite as well for me, and that I may not have told you about, but borrowing from the simple steps. There's an action that I don't love at the end of one of my coaching calls. One of my clients really likes to have highlights from the meeting. Mm-hmm. And there's something about, I don't know why, that is just not fun for me to do. And I, instead of saying, oh, I need to do this really great job because I put high demands on myself for how those highlights are going to read, I just say, all you need to do is look at the notes that you took during the meeting. And somehow, if I can get myself, like you, to just kind of stair-step these really small pieces, then the job gets done.
And that goes back to the project, getting the project started. Just outline a couple of ideas. Just write the introduction. Just put down where you need to go for research. And a momentum gets started often.
Right.
One of the things that people have struggled with is if you have to do a small thing and a large thing, a small change and a large change, which should you do first? Well, it's clear if you do the large change, the small change should come along easily, but in fact, for most of us, if we can just get this momentum of small changes or small steps going, then suddenly we're sort of into the bigger thing. Again, you have to individualize it, talk to the person, see it works for them, but for many of us, that small little step, that small little change, and suddenly there's something about your life, your business, whatever, that's just a little different.
Yeah, yeah. So in the 3 minutes that we have left, I would like to either check with you to see if there's something you know that we need to say, or I'd like to talk a little bit about how practicing anything creates a sort of self-discipline habit, ability. So do you have something that you would like to say?
Well, I was going to say, repeat things that you want to do, practice them, but then you said practice them. I think most of us just don't give enough credit to how just doing something again and again and again makes it easier to do it in the future.
So when you say that, how doing it again and again makes it easier, I would say what I've learned from you and from, you know, just the work that we do is that if I or my client practices some discipline in this arena and they get good at it, and it could be as simple as me with the toothpaste, I am now more equipped to get those highlights done, to wait 5 minutes before I eat the chocolate that I really want to eat, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, this is a skill you're practicing over here, the skill of disciplining yourself, paying attention to yourself, doing something in a deliberate way. And that skill is transferable to other things. And so the more you can do of that, the easier it will be to do each one of those. So yeah, it's a piece of the practice. So if you go home today, you know, and you feel like eating, as I do, that chocolate-covered coffee bean, and I say, yeah, I can have it, but I'm going to wait 5 minutes. I may not have it in 5 minutes, and that's maybe good for me, but that 5 minutes that I've waited just builds the practice. Riding my bike helps me to get projects done. Each thing kind of supports the other, and we need to get into a situation in our lives where we become people who are comfortable with change, have practiced change, and you know, can do it.
Yeah. You said something that I liked in the book, in the Simple Steps to Change book, and you said whatever you repeat often enough will become a permanent habit. And it just was so straightforward. And so for the good habits, I could practice saying it. Right, whatever you repeat often enough will become a permanent habit. And what I'm aware of is that we're talking in this show today about positive habits. What I'm aware of too in our lives is what we've practiced that becomes a negative habit that we then have to transition out of into something more positive. So if I'm a warrior, then I need to really stop practicing and repeating that.
Isn't that comforting to know that those bad habits, there's nothing magical about them, you've just repeated them a lot.
Right, right.
So there's a way out. Start repeating something else, stop repeating them. It's kind of